Every time I tried to cook, my husband's parent pushed me aside, saying, "You'll never be good enough for my child." My husband shrugged and said, "It's just how things are." I smiled, took off my apron, and said, "Good, because this is the last meal you'll ever make in my kitchen." Their jaw dropped as security walked in. I never thought I'd be sharing this, but here goes. My name's Sarah, and I'm 32. I live in Arlington, Virginia, with my husband, David, who's 35. We've been married for 3 years. David's parents, Margaret and Richard, have been a constant presence in our lives since day one. They live about 20 minutes away in McLean. When David and I first moved into our home, I was excited to make it our own. Cooking has always been a passion of mine, and I looked forward to preparing meals for us. But every time I tried, Margaret would show up unannounced. She'd make her way into the kitchen, glance at what I was doing, and say, "Oh, let me handle this. You don't want David eating that." Then she'd take over, leaving me standing there, feeling useless. Richard wasn't much better. He'd sit in the living room, barely acknowledging me, and when he did, it was usually to agree with Margaret. David would just shrug and say, "It's just how they are." I tried to talk to him about it, but he didn't see the problem. This went on for months. Every time I tried to cook, Margaret would intervene. She'd criticize my methods, tell me I was doing it wrong, and insist on doing it herself. I felt like a guest in my own home. One evening, I decided to make a special dinner for David and me. I spent hours preparing his favorite dishes. Just as I was setting the table, the doorbell rang. It was Margaret and Richard. They walked in without waiting for an invitation. Margaret saw the table and said, "Oh, you're cooking. Let me take over. You don't want to mess this up." I looked at David, hoping he'd say something, but he just shrugged. That was the last straw. I took off my apron, placed it on the counter, and said, "Good, because this is the last meal you'll ever make in my kitchen." Margaret's eyes widened. "Excuse me," she said. I walked to the living room and called the security company we had recently hired. 2 uniformed officers arrived within minutes. Margaret and Richard were still standing in the kitchen, looking shocked. "Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Thompson out," I said. "They are no longer welcome here without an invitation." The officers nodded and approached them. Margaret turned to David and said, "Are you going to let her do this?" David looked at me, then at his parents, and said, "I think it's best if you leave." Margaret and Richard left, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After they were gone, David and I had a long talk. He finally understood how much their behavior had been affecting me. We agreed to set boundaries with his parents and to stand together as a team. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for our marriage. Since then, Margaret and Richard have respected our boundaries. They no longer show up unannounced, and when they do visit, they don't interfere in the kitchen. David has been more supportive, and our relationship has grown stronger. It took a dramatic action to get there, but it was worth it. It had been about a month since the incident, and things were calmer. Or at least, that's what I told myself. David was more attentive. He'd help clean up after meals, thanked me when I cooked, and even defended me once when his mom called to check in. That alone felt like a miracle. But here's where things started getting weird. One Saturday morning, David went out for his usual jog. I stayed in bed a little longer, finally getting up around 9 to make some coffee. I opened the blinds and noticed a car parked across the street. It was familiar. Silver Lexus. Margaret's. I blinked. No one was inside. Weird, I thought. I called David. No answer. I didn't want to panic. I kept myself busy, but every so often I peeked out the window. The car didn't move. Hours passed. Then around 1 p.m., the car was gone. That night, I asked David if he'd spoken to his parents. "Nope," he said casually. "Why?" "Nothing. Just thought I saw your mom's car outside earlier." He stopped chewing for half a second, then kept eating. "No idea," he said. "Maybe she was in the neighborhood." But something about the way he said it didn't sit right. 2 days later, I found out from a neighbor, Mrs. Henley, 3 doors down, that she saw that blonde woman with the tight curls snooping around our backyard Sunday afternoon. She was holding a Tupperware, she said with a little laugh. I figured you were home. I was not. And I certainly didn't invite Margaret into my backyard. I asked David again that night. This time, more directly. Was your mom here Sunday? He hesitated. Then, she dropped off some stew. Why didn't you tell me? I knew you'd get upset. I stood there quiet. Not because I didn't have anything to say, because I had too much. She entered our backyard without permission. After I told her she was not welcome unless invited. She was just trying to help. There it was again. That shrug. That goddamn shrug. That night I slept in the guest room. Things only got worse from there. Every few days, I'd find little signs that Margaret had been around. A dish of cookies on the porch. Fresh flowers left on the back step. Once, an envelope with no name, just a folded note that said, I know what's best. That sent a chill down my spine. I installed cameras. Quietly. I didn't tell David. It only took a week for them to catch what I feared, Margaret slipping in through the back gate at 6:43 a.m. She didn't knock. She just walked into our backyard, placed a pie on the patio table, then wandered around like she owned the place. I downloaded the footage, then waited for David to come home. When I showed him, he went pale. I'll talk to her, he said. David. She's trespassing. I know. But talking wasn't enough for me anymore. I wanted action. Boundaries were already crossed. This wasn't a mother-in-law trying to reconnect, this was control. I handed him an envelope. What's this? He asked. Cease and desist letter. I had a lawyer draft it. He didn't open it. Just stared at it like I'd handed him a grenade. You had a lawyer? I had to. You weren't doing anything. You're taking this too far. No, I said. I should have done this months ago. He didn't sleep in our bed that night. Then, the twist I didn't expect, Margaret filed a wellness check on me. The police knocked on my door 3 days after I handed David the letter. Ma'am, are you okay? Your mother-in-law reported that you've been isolated and may be in distress. I laughed. It wasn't even funny. I invited the officer in, showed him the cameras, the footage, even the cease and desist letter. He left apologizing. But the damage was done. Margaret was trying to build a case. I wasn't crazy, she was setting me up. And David? He started sleeping at his parents' house. That's when I realized something big. He wasn't on the fence anymore. He'd picked a side. Not mine. So, David started sleeping at his parents' house. He claimed it was temporary. That things had escalated too fast. That everyone needs space. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just watched as the man I married slowly drifted toward the woman who once looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You'll never be good enough." But I wasn't sitting around doing nothing. While David was gone, I met with my lawyer again. Her name was Claire. Sharp. No nonsense. She looked at the wellness check report, the security footage, the voicemail Margaret had left 2 days earlier where she said, and I quote, "You don't belong in that house. I'll make sure everyone sees it." Claire raised her eyebrows and said, "Do you have a prenup?" I didn't. But David and I bought the house together. And I had receipts. Mortgage payments in my name. Utility bills. Renovation invoices. My money went into everything. Then she asked, "Did he ever change the locks on you?" "No," I said. "Good. If he tries, call me first. And keep those cameras running." It was around this time something odd happened. I came home from work one night and the air smelled sweet. Like perfume. Not mine. I checked the bedroom. Closet slightly ajar. My underwear drawer? Open. That feeling, that tight gut twist, hit me fast. I opened my jewelry box. Nothing was missing, but everything was moved. I checked the camera feed. No footage. Somehow, the system had been powered off. It had been working that morning. I checked the outside unit. The wire had been cleanly clipped. Someone had come in and they knew what they were doing. I called Claire. She didn't sound surprised. Change the locks. No. I did. And then I filed a police report. 2 days later, David showed up out of nowhere. No warning. Just walked through the front door like nothing happened. I'd forgotten to activate the new locks. That was my mistake. He was calm, almost smug. Hey, he said, like he didn't abandon me. I stared at him. Why are you here? I came to pick up a few things. Mom told me you filed a police report. Really? I kept my tone steady. Yes, because someone came into the house. The cameras were cut. And I didn't invite anyone. He leaned against the counter. You think she did that? I said nothing. He smirked. You're paranoid. Then I said it. The thing that had been bubbling under the surface for weeks. Did you give her a key, David? He paused. Just long enough. Maybe once. A long time ago. In case of emergencies. She cut the cameras. He shook his head. You can't prove that. Then he picked up his gym bag and left. No apology. No concern. Just left. That night, I changed the locks again. Paid extra for an access log system. Every entry recorded, every door code unique. No keys this time. Just digital. Then the next bomb dropped. Claire called. Sarah. David filed a petition for temporary occupancy. I blinked. What? He wants to move back in, citing that the house is mutual marital property and he was unlawfully removed. I sat down. My heart was pounding. He's trying to force his way back in? Yes, and he has legal grounds to try. But she paused. You have something stronger. What? The footage. The police report. The wellness check. The lawyer notes. The pattern of harassment. We're going to flip this on them. And that's when I learned what protective occupancy meant. Claire filed an emergency petition claiming I was being harassed and intimidated by David's family, and that David had enabled it, making the house unsafe. She backed it with evidence, dates, timestamps. 3 days later, a judge signed the order. David was legally barred from returning to the property, temporarily. Margaret? Her name was on the no trespass order. I expected quiet. I was wrong. The next morning, my car tires were slashed. All 4. There were no cameras facing the street. That was on me. But something was tucked under my windshield. A single napkin. Lipstick kiss mark. Smelled like that same perfume. No words, just the kiss. And I swear to God, it matched the same color Margaret wore the night she ruined my first Thanksgiving dinner. The cops took another report. And now? Now I sleep with pepper spray on my nightstand. I don't know what Margaret and David are planning next. But something's coming. I can feel it. After the tires were slashed, I started keeping a notebook. I wrote everything down. Dates, times, anything suspicious. I became my own detective. I wasn't just documenting things for the cops or my lawyer anymore. I needed it for me, proof that I wasn't crazy. Margaret stopped leaving gifts. No more notes. No more lipstick kisses. But she wasn't gone. I knew it. Sometimes I'd hear her voice late at night, just outside the window. Low. Muttering. Once, I turned on the porch light and found a scarf of hers tied to the railing. Like she was marking territory. David, meanwhile, went quiet. No calls. No texts. I knew it was on purpose. Claire called me one morning and said he filed for divorce. I didn't cry. She kept talking, explaining the terms, what we could do, what we couldn't, but my ears started ringing. He was really doing it. He was trying to erase me. The man who stood next to me and promised forever had joined his mother in trying to take me down. And now he wanted to start over. Probably with Margaret sitting on his shoulder like some evil puppet master. But here's the thing, I was ready. I'd already moved the money from our joint account into a separate one when he stopped sleeping at the house. Legal. Documented. Half of it was mine. I filed a counterpetition with Claire's help, claiming emotional abuse and harassment by proxy. The paper trail was strong. Too strong to ignore. And then, I did something big. Petty? Maybe. But satisfying? Oh, yes. See, Margaret was a board member of the HOA in her neighborhood. She was proud of it. She loved control. Loved rules. But the kicker? She wasn't following them. I knew because I hired a private investigator. Nothing crazy, just someone to monitor when and how she ran her little kingdom. He found violations. Lots. Turns out Margaret had built an unapproved patio extension. Illegal. She also had an unlicensed Airbnb running out of their guest house, something she swore publicly she would never allow in her neighborhood. I submitted an anonymous report to the city, with pictures. The HOA investigated. Fines were issued. The board voted. Margaret was removed from her position. She lost her power, her voice, and then I hit David where it hurt most, his job. Through a mutual friend, I learned he'd been lying about his work hours, using sick days to spy on me, maybe even helping his mother sneak into the backyard. I gathered all the times and dates and sent a neat, fact-filled email to HR at his company. 2 weeks later, he was let go. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. Our court date finally came. Margaret showed up in all black, like she was at a funeral. David looked tired, pale, smaller. Claire and I walked in with folders, receipts, dates, and statements. We laid out everything. The judge listened, asked questions, then dropped the hammer. I was granted sole ownership of the house. Margaret was issued a permanent restraining order. David walked away with a small settlement and a warning from the court to take accountability for the role you played in enabling the events described here. He didn't look at me as we left. And honestly, I didn't care. 3 months later, the divorce was final. I repainted the kitchen, replaced the stove. Throughout the apron I wore the night Margaret told me I'd never be good enough. Sometimes I catch myself staring out the window, remembering how low I sank, how scared I was, how much I let slide. I made mistakes too. I stayed silent too long. I waited for someone else to defend me when I should have defended myself from day one. But I learned. And I fought. And in the end, I got the one thing they swore I'd never have: peace.